I first noticed him as soon as I walked into the restaurant. The waiter, with a forced smile and tired eyes, didn't even glance at me as he handed over the menu. His tone was clipped, and his gestures felt impatient, almost as if he wanted to be anywhere but here. Being a businessman, I'm used to different kinds of people, some eager to please, others just trying to get by. But something about this man's attitude struck a chord. He wasn't just indifferent, he seemed angry. "Would you like something to drink?" he asked curtly, without so much as making eye contact. I set the menu down slowly, taking in his rigid posture and the lines on his face. "Sure," I said with a polite smile. "A glass of sparkling water, please." He nodded briskly and disappeared without another word. As I waited, I looked around. The place was fancy, with an air of sophistication, the kind of restaurant where people came to impress their dates or close deals. It wasn't new to me. I'd dined in such places countless times, but something about tonight felt off. When he returned with the water, he almost slammed the glass on the table. I frowned, but stayed quiet. "Ready to order?" he asked, still avoiding my gaze. I glanced at the menu, then back at him. "You seem upset. Is everything okay?" That got his attention. His jaw tightened, and for a split second I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it frustration? Or pain? "I'm fine," he said curtly, taking a step back. "Are you ready to order or not?" I nodded slowly and placed my order. As he walked away, I couldn't help but feel that there was more to his story. Something wasn't adding up, and I decided I wasn't going to let it slide. As I waited for my meal, I couldn't shake the waiter's demeanor. His actions weren't just rude, they seemed personal, almost like he resented my very presence. I'd seen plenty of unmotivated workers before, but this felt different. When he returned with my starter, I decided to observe him more closely. His uniform was neat but slightly worn, and his shoes had seen better days. His hands trembled slightly as he set the plate down, though he tried to hide it. He didn't ask if I needed anything else, just turned and moved on to another table. I noticed how he interacted with others. With some, he was equally brusque, but with others, particularly the older, wealthier-looking diners, he seemed almost indifferent. Yet when a young couple walked in, clearly nervous about being in such an expensive place, he softened. His tone was still hurried, but there was a flicker of kindness. "Interesting," I muttered under my breath. The restaurant manager passed by my table a few moments later, and I flagged him down. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice low. "The waiter serving my table, what's his name?" The manager raised an eyebrow, clearly wary of complaints. "That's John," he replied. "Is there a problem, sir?" I shook my head. "Not at all. He's interesting. Has he been working here long?" The manager hesitated, glancing in John's direction. "A few months," he said finally. "He's a good worker, but he's dealing with some personal issues." I nodded, sensing the manager didn't want to share more. But now I was curious. There was a story here, and I couldn't ignore it. By the time my main course arrived, I had made up my mind. I wasn't leaving this restaurant until I understood what was going on. When John brought my main course, I decided to test the waters. "Thank you," I said warmly, meeting his eyes. "You've been very efficient tonight. Do you always work this hard?" He blinked, caught off guard by the compliment. For a moment, I thought he might actually smile, but it never came. "Just doing my job," he said flatly and turned to leave. "John, wait," I said gently, stopping him. He paused, visibly annoyed, but turned back around. "Yes?" "I don't mean to pry, but you seem preoccupied. Is everything all right?" His jaw tightened, and his eyes darted around the room as if checking to see if anyone else was watching. "I'm fine," he said, his voice clipped. Before I could press further, a sharp voice interrupted us. "John, stop chatting and get back to work." It was the restaurant manager glaring at him from across the room. John muttered something under his breath and walked away quickly. The manager gave me an apologetic smile and returned to his duties. I sat back, thinking. Whatever John was dealing with, it wasn't just affecting his attitude. It seemed to weigh on every step he took. After finishing my meal, I requested the bill. As I waited, I noticed John stepping outside, likely for a break. Something told me this was my chance to get some answers. I followed him, keeping a respectful distance. Outside, I found him leaning against the wall, his shoulders slumped and his head bowed. "John," I called out softly. He startled and straightened up, his expression guarded. Sir, if you're here to complain. I'm not, I interrupted. I just want to talk, please. He hesitated but finally nodded. All right, what do you want to know? I stepped closer, keeping my tone gentle. I couldn't help but notice you're carrying a lot on your shoulders. I'm not here to judge or make trouble, I just want to understand. John's face hardened, but then, as if a dam had broken, his expression crumpled. You wouldn't understand, he muttered, his voice thick with emotion. Try me, I urged. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling as he began to speak. I'm here because I have no choice. My wife's in the hospital, cancer, and the bills are piling up. I'm working double shifts just to keep her treatment going, and even then it's not enough. This job, he paused, his voice cracking. This job is all I've got right now. I stared at him, stunned. The frustration, the anger, it all made sense now. That's why you've been distant? I asked softly. He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. I'm sorry if I came off as rude. It's just hard to stay polite when every second feels like a countdown I can't stop. My heart ached for him. I knew then that I couldn't walk away without doing something. John's words echoed in my mind as I returned to my table. His pain was raw, his struggle so evident, and yet he was carrying it all alone. I had seen hardship before. But his story hit differently. It wasn't just about him. It was about love, sacrifice, and the limits a person would push themselves to for someone they cared about. I sat quietly for a moment, staring at the untouched dessert in front of me. Then, an idea began to take shape. I wasn't sure if he'd accept my help, but I knew I had to try. After paying the bill, I approached the manager discreetly. Excuse me, I said. Could you give me John's full name and tell me where he usually works outside of here? It's important. The manager looked hesitant. Sir, I'm not sure if I can. I leaned in and said firmly, I'm not here to cause trouble. I want to help him, but I can't do it if I don't know how. The manager studied me for a moment before sighing. All right. His name is John Harper. I know he used to do construction work before he started here, but that's about it. I nodded and thanked him. As I left the restaurant, I pulled out my phone and made a few calls. Being in business for years had given me connections, and tonight, I planned to use every one of them. By the time I got home, I had a plan. The first step was getting in touch with a medical fund I had supported in the past, a program that helped families dealing with crushing healthcare costs. Cancer treatment, you said? The representative asked over the phone. Yes, his wife, I confirmed. I'll cover the costs, just make sure it happens quickly. The second step was more personal. I couldn't erase all of John's struggles, but I could give him a hand up. I reached out to an associate who owned a construction firm. Do you have room for someone who's reliable and hardworking? I asked. Always, came the reply. What's his background? I'll send you the details, I said, smiling. By the time I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Tomorrow, I'd return to the restaurant, but this time, not just as a diner. I'd be bringing change with me. The next evening, I returned to the restaurant. The place was just as bustling as before, but this time I wasn't here for the food. I spotted John immediately. He was rushing between tables, the same wariness etched on his face. As I approached him, he noticed me and stiffened, probably assuming I had come to complain. Sir, he began cautiously, if there's an issue with yesterday. There's no issue, John, I interrupted, smiling, but I do need to speak with you. Privately. He hesitated, glancing around the room. I'm working. I've already spoken to your manager. He said it's fine, I assured him. Reluctantly, John followed me to a quieter corner of the restaurant. His guarded expression hadn't changed, but there was a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. John, I started, I've been thinking a lot about what you told me yesterday, about your wife, your struggles, and I wanted to do something. He stiffened further, shaking his head. I don't need charity, he said quickly. This isn't charity, I said gently. It's a lifeline. I've arranged for your wife's medical bills to be covered by a reputable fund. They specialize in helping families like yours. Her treatment will continue without you having to worry about the costs. John stared at me, his face a mixture of shock and disbelief. You did what? I also spoke to someone who runs a construction company. They're ready to offer you a stable job, one that pays more than this place ever could. You won't have to work double shifts anymore. For a moment, he just stood there, blinking as though trying to process my words. Then his eyes welled up with tears. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." I smiled softly, because I could see how hard you're fighting for the people you love. That kind of dedication deserves support, not judgment. Sometimes, we all need a little help to get through the tough times. John covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking as the emotions overwhelmed him. I placed a comforting hand on his arm, giving him time to let it all sink in. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. The weight of the world seemed lighter on his shoulders. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You don't have to," I said simply. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything," he replied. "Pay it forward when you can," I said. "Help someone else the way you were helped. That's all I ask." He nodded firmly, tears still streaming down his face. "I will. I swear I will." As I walked out of the restaurant, I glanced back one last time. John stood there, his posture no longer hunched with despair but upright with newfound hope. I knew his journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, but at least now he wasn't facing them alone. Thank you so much for watching this story. I hope it touched your heart as much as it did mine. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with someone who might need to hear it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below and let me know how this story resonated with you. Your support helps me keep creating content like this. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.